If you're ignoring listing optimization or search engine optimization from the major search engines, you're really missing out on some huge opportunities. I don't know about you, but a lot of the times the way that I find an Amazon product is I go to Google and I search and then I'll insert the word Amazon, right? So
Right.
like your listings are being indexed by Google, right? And so all of the data, I mean, you mentioned it on our last episode. The Q&A section is a flipping gold mine for user generated content that you can put more weight on. And you can bet your biscuits that the guy who wrote the web crawler that went into Google, he's looking at the product description and he's like, yeah, they stuffed that with all sorts of keywords. But that user generated content, any keyword that is found by a user that put it in there, he's going to give that thing more weight. And so anything you can do to encourage your customers to ask questions, to get user generated content out there, reviews, and pushing on all of that, it's going to help all across the board.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the e-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm super excited to chat with Will because um, he's a go-to-market specialist at Seller Labs, which is really immersed into the world of Amazon selling, which Amazon's marketplace has just really been a gigantic force. And if you're not in it, you're actually probably getting crushed by it. So, Will, why don't you start with the elevator pitch for Seller Labs and why it's key for any DTC marketer to think about marketplaces?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say the biggest piece here is we give agencies superpowers. So our goal is to understand Amazon's data better than anyone else, and it better than themselves. Actually, we jump on podcasts or podcasts. We're on a podcast. We jump on meetings with them, and their API developers have like, oh my, you do know a lot about this. So it's pretty exciting from that standpoint. So we clean up all of that data and make it immediately available for agencies around the world to take different modules that we build. We call them superpowers or apps, and they're able to use those to make their clients' brands better.
Cool, cool. Well, you've either directly or indirectly probably had a chance to get exposed to a lot of different Amazon sellers in
Yep.
in a diversity of different industry categories. Are there missed opportunities that bubble up to the surface pretty regularly where like, up, I don't even need to take a look. Like, I know this is going to be a problem, or yep, 80% of the time people miss this opportunity. Just stuff that's maybe low-hanging fruit that once people have the tools, like the tools that you guys help agencies deploy, or maybe you have direct clients as well. But once those are enabled, it sort of bubbles up a to-do list that's like, people can immediately go down the punch list.
Yes. So the other thing I would say is, and we didn't talk about this at all. The first company I founded is called Data Automation, and they automate things connecting two different platforms. And so I'm one of the world's first Zapier certified experts as well. And so I'll speak both to the automation side of things that I see people missing, as well as to the other side. And a lot of what I'm aware of and digging into is about tools. It's about, what have you put in place to help you automate, delegate, or eliminate different pieces of the process to scale your business. So the first thing I would say is, just from a sheer magnitude, I'm honestly surprised still at how many businesses are not doing basic feedback or request a review emails. I hate to mention this too deeply, but I have been on the phone with several agencies before who are like, yeah, we don't really do that yet, so we're looking for something to kind of help us with it. Like, it's really surprising how often that basic request a review or feedback tool that's existed for 10 years. Feedback Genius was one of the first. that came to the table when Brandon Checketts was he had a problem where he was doing books or mixed media, and he would get a hold of DVDs that didn't have the case. And so in his specific situation, people would give him a bad review because they didn't read the description that was listed on Amazon. And so he would preempt that by sending them an email and saying, hey, just to make sure you knew, this specific item does not have a case. And his feedback score is like his seller rating went up by like 15 or 20%, like from 83 up to like 93 or 80, some astronomical number that actually really helped him get the buy box better. And that was the whole point of that first tool. So I'm honestly surprised at how often that's not in place.
Yeah, that sounds like some low-hanging fruit that a lot of folks could potentially take a look at. And then from the perspective of like when people audit that, hopefully there's a bunch of folks watching or listening who actually think, oh, well, we do that, but I'm not sure that the language in it is particularly good, right?
Yep.
Is there sort of magic language around sort of politely asking for a review where a person sort of feels psychologically motivated to do so?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think of the law of reciprocity, and it's actually really powerful as a sales guy. So I'm a go-to-market specialist, right? As a sales guy, I actually love it when people dodge me on a sales call because then I can immediately come back out and say, hey, totally get it. You missed the call, whatever, and then move the appointment to the next day. And I just got like an emotional bank account, a deposit into my account, and then I can go withdraw that later. And so if you miss 2 or 3 appointments, the likelihood of you buying from me goes up dramatically, right? Like that's just the law of reciprocity. And that law of reciprocity applies to everything. Waiters, waitresses. If you notice like a waiter or waitress that gives you great service and then walk up at the end of the meal and they look left, they look right, and they put some mints on the table, and then they look left and they look right, and they put some extra mints on the table, and then they walk away. Like that small gesture of like, I did something extra for you. Well, now it's your turn to give a tip. So you got to give a tip. You got to do something extra for them, right? There's this, I don't really want to owe anybody anything mentality that we have. And that's just a general thing. So anything you can do to provide value for them in that email, go above and beyond just, hey, really hope you enjoyed our product. But like go deeper and say, okay, what are the 10 things that everybody wants to know about my product as they're getting in there? Like really educating them about what's there, or helping them overcome some of the challenges that they could face if they're using your product. I mean, many people's products are complicated and they may not think they're complicated, but do enough interviewing and you'll figure out, this is actually fairly complicated and not everybody gets it. So how do I make this easy?
Yeah.
Right. And so providing value in that email is the key to that process.
Right. Well, one thing that's fascinating about the Amazon marketplace, particularly as it relates to sponsored listings, is that you don't have a lot of the targeting levers that you're used to if you're doing a lot of Google or Meta advertising, particularly Google, right? So the only way you can get at some of these extra features is actually to use a third-party platform, right? And so, if you're going to use a bid management platform, if you want to do day parting, right? The only way you can do day parting or day of week based bidding is to be using a third party. But of course, sellers and agencies are sort of inundated with a lot of different platforms to choose from. And some of them do like one thing really well, right? And others are sort of like, no, it's a Swiss Army knife. And then the person's like, yeah, but how sharp is blade number 3? Like, blade number 3 is pretty important to me. Like, I'm not really sure. Should I go and buy this other knife that, it's a sushi knife? Like, it's really good at this. So, I notice at events, whether it's, Prosper or one of the other events, there's a plethora of platforms. And you as an agency or as a FBA brand, the process of decisioning around that is just really difficult.
Yeah.
right? Because
Yep.
you do know you need almost all the blades in the Swiss Army knife, or half of the blades in the Swiss Army knife. But you're like, do I want like that really fat Swiss Army knife, or do I want to go out and buy individual tools? And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do you recommend people make those decisions as they think about, yeah, I really do need automation. I really need great data. I need great dashboards, but I'm just not sure how to wade my through self through that.
So the number one thing I would say is start with the end in mind. So when I hunt for software, I actually go in and I start to outline. So it's not something that happens immediately, right? Like I'm using my current piece of software, I'm using my current manual process, and I say, okay, this was annoying. I really wish I had a tool that did this. That thought is actually a gift to you from your conscious that's saying, like, you probably should pay attention to this a little closer.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that you take that thought and actually dig in and go do something with it, meaning like write it down. And I've found that if I'm good about it, if I write down those things in a way that actually helps me get my thoughts around everything that's going on, then overall it becomes a really powerful tool. So yeah, recognize that thought of like, oh, I really wish it did this. Like if you document that in a spreadsheet and then across the top you start listing out platforms that you think might solve those different things, you can quickly create a matrix or a grid that tells you which piece of software is going to do the best for you. So I mean, in the other agency that at data automation, we were we were using Trello, which Trello is a pretty basic Kanban system for project management. We needed to switch to something else. And man, our project managers did this really awesome matrix, and they went even a step further and they weighted each of the different things. So a score of 1 to 100, how important is this feature to us? And then using Excel, they literally just gave everybody a score. So like yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And there were some must-haves, right? Like there were some that like if you didn't have this, we just knocked you off the list.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty complex way to do it. But I think at a bare minimum, pull out a sticky note and start writing down the thoughts of I wish I had this. Because if you start stacking those into your subconscious to the point where eventually it bursts and you say, now I need something, it's still in your subconscious. Like you calling that back up and making the decision about what's there, all of a sudden now it's emotional, right? And if you look at the studies, like we are emotional beings. And so a lot of times if you're not careful, you're making a decision on which software to buy based on which sales guy does the best job at wooing you. So yeah, take the emotion out of it by connecting those dots and writing down those wishes and wants, and then creating a matrix, even a simple one for yourself. Have that sticky note, slap it up there when the wooer, the magic guy who gives you all that. Software sales guys are worse than vacuum cleaner sales guys. Have that sitting on your monitor, and it says like, here are my must-haves, just right there, so that when he starts asking you questions or telling you that's not that important, you can be like, no, like I remember when I was in a normal emotional state, this was important. So
Right.
just the nature of the process. You've got to be true to that person who sat there in that moment and said, oh, crap, I really wish it did
Yeah.
X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. The other headwind, I think, is SaaS platforms in particular love the product comparison matrix that has all the check boxes in there and sort of compares sometimes their competitors as well. And of course, because the checkbox is in row 14, doesn't necessarily mean that that SaaS platform fulfills that promise, right? It may be there checked off, right? But it may be one of their subpar features, right?
Yep.
And so at that point, now you sort of, okay, now you need to talk to a human. You need to talk to the sales rep, who of course will try to
Yep.
distract you with the shiny objects of everything else that it does. But you need to figure out if
Does
row
this
14
piece
is super
actually
important to you.
do? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, does it do a
Uh,
good job at it?
Well, and that's the whole like scoring thing, right?
Yeah,
Especially anything that's above a 90 in terms of your of what's there, go play with it.
yeah,
Go interview, and I find that it's important to interview if you can get past the first sales guy and get to the technical sales guy,
right.
the one you want somebody who has to deal with you after the sale is made,
Yeah,
right? So that this is somebody who has to deal with customers on a regular basis, and generally there's a technical sales guy, and that's his job. Is like he does have to deal with some of the people who get in there, and so he can tell you like this is exactly how it works. Here, let me show you. You know, let me pick that apart, and then you've got an idea of what it looks like without having to go pick it apart and look at it. Another thing that's pretty easy to do is just hit the social media channels and search for the name of whatever what you know. Let's say that you were going to use Zapier, for example. If you go type Zapier and search that in your social media on LinkedIn or on Facebook, you'll find other people in your network who are using that platform. And it's easy to just do a connect message. And if you open a connect message on LinkedIn and say, hey, saw you're using Zapier, I'm considering that platform. Like, would you mind? Could I just ask you like 10 questions, jump on a quick 15-minute call? You'll be surprised at how people are like, oh my gosh, I wish somebody had done that for me when I was buying, you know. So again, law of reciprocity. People want to help people. So depending on what you're building or connecting and looking at, it's totally and honestly, if the product's any good, they'll totally refer you to a customer that's currently using it.
yeah,
So
yeah. Although sometimes I've even, taken it upon myself if I see a testimonial on a SaaS platform website, is I'll reach out to the testimonial person and I'll say, okay, so what did you not say about it? Right? Because they gave the most glowing sentence in your email, right? And that was the one they attributed to you. But what did you not say? Like there's clearly room
I
for it
like
to
that a
improve.
lot. What did you not email all the people on the front page and say, could you tell me what they don't say? I actually do that with products on Amazon.
Right?
Sometimes I'll just go look at the negative reviews. I end up buying products sometimes because of the negative reviews more than the positive ones because I can tell, oh, that's user error. Oh, that's user error. Oh, that's user. Okay, these guys just don't know how to use this product.
Right?
I'm good to buy it. Right? Like it's pretty obvious, especially with the more technical like smart home stuff. It
Yeah.
is crazy how I can't. I'm glad I'm not in that category. Let me just put it that way. Competing with the bad reviews for the stupid people, that's just rough. But yeah,
Yeah,
100%. What did you not say?
exactly.
Not say.
Well, let's change gears because one thing that has really been bubbling up to the surface a lot for did clients and for prospects I run into for shows is obviously all the changes to the SEO landscape that will be partially driven off of AI. So one of the things that is oddly ignored is the SEO power of using marketplaces for your products and product reviews and getting those to rank, not just your Shopify store or your Magento store. And obviously, in the case of Amazon, like who has more SEO juice than Amazon? Not a lot of platforms do. And I just find that it's ignored, right? That the to SEO your product listing pages and your company pages so that they rank better in Amazon so that you can drive more Amazon sales is something that sometimes isn't even on the top 10 list for these sellers. And it's just, sometimes just like a simple little audit of those pages can result in some pretty dramatic ranking changes in a Google or a Bing. And so, would that be in sort of one of your top 5 or 10 to-do lists when you take a look at a DTC seller as well?
Absolutely. I mean, SEO, if you're ignoring listing optimization or search engine optimization from the major search engines, you're really missing out on some huge opportunities. I don't know about you, but a lot of the times the way that I find an Amazon product is I go to Google and I search and then I'll insert the word Amazon, right? So
Right.
like your listings are being indexed by Google, right? And so all of the data, I mean, you mentioned it on our last episode. The Q&A section is a flipping gold mine for user generated content that you can put more weight on. And you can bet your biscuits that the guy who wrote the web crawler that went into Google he's looking at the product description and he's like, yeah, they stuffed that with all sorts of keywords. But that user generated content, any keyword that is found by a user that put it in there, he's going to give that thing more weight. And so anything you can do to encourage your customers to ask questions, to get user generated content out there, reviews, and pushing on all of that, it's going to help all across the board because they're not stupid, right? The web crawler guy who built that, there was a point at which when it was just like vacuum up all of the keywords on the page and whoever has the most wins. That was a thing at a time a while ago. Well, we've advanced a little bit now. We have AI. I mean, with the invention of AI, there's even like the whole idea of being like analyze this review and pretend, run it through an analysis and see if it was fake. Oh yeah, we're downplaying. Like it's just crazy how much authentic user generated content is going to be king.
Yeah, it was funny, in the early days of the marketplaces, and just also with people's own stores on Magento. I'll call it Magento till I'm dead, probably. But and Shopify, clients used to come to us and say, people misspell this word all the time, but I can't misspell it in my product description. Like, but I'd like to rank for it because it gets misspelled like 30% of the time. It's a difficult word. It's like IE or they get an EI, whatever. Now the AIs will automatically sort of fix for that. But, if it's a query, but it used to be that would be how we would sneak the misspellings into the product pages, is to have a reviewer misspell it, right? So that it would start to show up. And, it's the same thing with synonyms. Like if you wanted a synonym to show up for something, you'd be like, oh, well, it would look odd sort of written into the product copy, but, because it'd get too dense or whatever. And so you'd be like, all right, well, we've got a friendly who can do an authentic looking review. We don't like to do that. We don't like to write, our own reviews or influence them directly. But sometimes that was the only way you could get in a misspelling or get in a synonym or competitive word, right? To where it compared you to a competitor was through a product, through a review, right? If
Yeah.
you wanted to rank for a
Oh,
competing word.
there is definitely, and I would call this borderline black hat or borderline gray hat, but I wonder how often when I'm going through and looking at a product and I find a 5-star review that mentions another product, like a very similar other product, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna check that out, but that's a little bit sneaky.
It's sketchy, yeah.
Yeah, about that. Yeah, no, it's honestly, those reviews are so important. So, I mean, if you get an all-star, like, wow, they love it kind of person, I mean, that's not a bad idea to be like, hey, would love it if you told everybody everywhere about my product, right? So, yeah, no, 100%.
So back to sort of the punch list that you would is sort of a typical lowest hanging fruit punch list. Anything else on there that you find that people really need to pay more attention to?
Yeah, I'm gonna shift over into my automate side of things.
Cool.
The number one thing that I have found people not using, this is an app. It's a very basic app that you got to put on your computer. Is actually a clipboard manager. This is a very common. Have you ever been in a situation where you had 2 or 3 pieces of data in a row and you needed to copy all 3 over into an email, but you couldn't copy them all at once because you didn't want the entire row? You just wanted the one thing in that column. Right? Has that ever happened to you?
Of course.
For me, it happens like 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah.
And so what I've discovered is a clipboard manager will take and store a history of what you've taken, what you copied. So you can stay on that page, copy the first item, copy the second item, copy the third item, flip over to your email. And then those 3 things are in the top part of the clipboard manager. And several clipboard managers, you can highlight those 3 things and click paste. So you just saved yourself the back and forth flipping between those different things. I mean, it saved you like 15 to 30 seconds, right? Well, but if you add that up for me, it's like 10 to 15 minutes a day. I'm very confident that that's what I'm looking for. And sometimes it saves my butt when I've like copied something and then I went over to somewhere else and I copied something else. I'm like, oh crap, I need that thing that I copied. Oh, good, it's still in my clipboard manager. Right? I don't know if that's happened to you before where you copy over something and you're thinking, oh, it's in my clipboard, I've got it. no big deal. And then you're like, oh, I kind of need to copy that. And oh, you just lost it. Like that's what a clipboard manager does. So highly recommend. My YouTube channel actually mentions clipboard managers, and I review two of them. It's called automationhunter.com. But yeah, no, like clipboard managers, major oops that I see from people. And it's shocking how many people are, oh, I'll install that later. Oh, I'll install that later. Oh, I'll install it. Just go install a clipboard manager. Just stop what you're doing right now. If you're in front of your computer, write it on a post-it note for tomorrow when you're sitting in front of your computer, install a clipboard manager. I've been pretty surprised at how much that can give me.
Well, that's a non-sexy tip, but it's a really powerful one. So absolutely. What's next on your punch list?
So the next one I would put on my punch list, honestly, and this is going to sound funny, a password manager. I've been very surprised at how many people don't know about LastPass or 1Password or any of those other platforms. I was talking to a guy the other day and I said, so where do you write down your passwords? And he like reached up here and he go like this. And I was like, oh, dude. He was like, I probably should write some of those down. If I got hit by a bus, my wife would be so. And I just like that, like terror. It is so hard for me. I had a situation once where I had a password that I was reusing in a couple of places, and it was like my, stuff that I like around the home. That was kind of the password that I was using, and it leaked. And I got a notification from LastPass that said, "Hey, this is shown up on the dark web. So you should probably go change this." And I went back and looked, and it was like 60 different websites, and they were just random things over the course of like 5 to 10 years that I had used, and some of them were like, oh, that's like a gaming software site where somebody could use my password to use my credit card to go buy video games. Okay, yeah, we're so there were like 5 or 6. I went and changed those immediately, and that wasn't that bad. But the other like 55 sites that had minimal levels of risk, it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take forever. So
Yeah.
a password manager saves you lots of times. If you ever get hacked, anything like that, it's just a powerful tool in terms of shoring up some of those pieces.
So one thing that is a problem I'm about to face under Truth Nutrition, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts on it, or you think there are resources that my team and I should delve into, is we've got a bunch of SKUs that we inherited when we bought the company, but we've also got a bunch of new SKUs coming out next month, right? And there are uh, completely white hat things like Vine, and then there's gray hat things, and then there's black hat things that we could use to sort of juice up initial reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on who you talk to, some people are like, "Oh, don't worry, you can do it this way, you won't get caught." Well, it's sort of like speeding down the highway.
Mm-hmm.
How fast do you want to speed, right? And so, any thoughts to folks who are releasing new products, and they
Man,
they want to figure out how to sort of get the maximum bang for the buck? Maybe
yeah.
they're willing to do 10 miles over the speed limit, but they know the faster they speed, the bigger the
Mm-hmm.
penalties, and the bigger the chances of getting caught.
I mean, so Seller Labs used to the funny thing you mentioned, well, Amazon stole this platform from me, Amazon Smile. That was kind of your baby. You were pushing on that, and they stole the idea, and and then they sunsetted it. Come on, but you're launching it again, which I'm excited to hear about. Like everything you're going to do with creating that space for nonprofits, because I founded a nonprofit and we were using Amazon Smile. We weren't getting a lot from it, but we were getting some. And so like we signed up and then they sunsetted. It was like, seriously? In any case, same thing happened to Seller Labs. We created Snag Shout. Snag Shout still exists today. It's kind of in that gray hat, black hat territory now. One of the founders went off and continued to do that. So
Mhm.
it still exists and you can still use it, but it's not part of the Seller Labs brand anymore. We don't own that anymore. And so, I wouldn't say that I officially endorse, that there, but there is that resource. And the second thing I would say is, my mom, this is hilarious. She literally comes to me the other day and she's like, "Well, I don't know how I did it, but I'm a Vine reviewer." And I was like, "Oh, tell me more. Like what, how does that work?" She can order 3 products a day. And it's all about that authentic review, right?
Yeah.
So 3 products a day under $100. And if she does that well over the course of like 3 months, then she can start to order anything over $100 a day. And it was so funny to hear her describe like all the weird products that she was like, I put in this thing and it was like, holy crap, there's a lot of supplements in there. Just, lots of different random things that people are trying to get there. So I would say definitely use Vine, definitely lean on those different pieces. But remember that law of reciprocity is a real thing at the beginning of your process. So any purchase that's being made in your process of looking at things, like try to give a lot of personalized um, information to the person who's buying, right? Create that value as quickly as possible, just like we talked about before, to get that review count up as much as it can. I've heard of Facebook groups where people will go in and they'll buy each other's products and things like that. I mean, I think you have to be careful, right? You have to kind of watch there. And one of the things I would want to know is like if I was joining a Facebook group, this is the thing I didn't think about when I heard about some of these review syndicates or however you want to, review mafias. We'll call them review mafias. When I heard about some of these, I didn't realize Amazon knows who you are as a reviewer,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so if you get caught in that category, like you're obviously being compensated for those things. So like even as an Amazon customer, I buy things on Snagshot every once in a while, random here or there, but I'm very careful about my review to make sure that it is like it's not just one of the short generic, it's obvious this guy got this for free, right? Like I'm very careful about making sure that my review is authentic, because if your account gets flagged as a customer, then everything you review from then on out, there's extra scrutiny. So I think the length of time that a review group existed, like the longer it existed, the less likely I would be to use it.
Right. Yeah.
Because that like the speeding, like if you're talking about speeding, the longer it's existed, the higher the speed is that you're driving by using that established group of people who review each other's products. So I not endorsing that those kind of stuff that's out there, but if you are going to try and do something like that, be sure you go with something that's not been around for a long time, because the ones that have been around longer, you're going to have more likely to have people in them who have been flagged.
Yeah, and the data analysis that's required to look for that, and the sort of web of reviews, it's not that difficult for a data scientist to say this is an outlier. There's something weird about this reviewer, right?
So to speak on the note of AI and just understanding some of what's possible there, um, they have started to store data in new ways, in matrices, where they actually turn the review into ones and zeros, and then they can compare the content of that review to a bunch of so to break it down for in layman's, basically they take the first sentence, the second sentence, the third sentence, the fourth sentence, the last sentence, and they'll store that in a matrix, which means you have the first column and it turns it into ones and zeros, and then the second column ones and zeros, and the ones and zeros represent the sentence, right? And you can even go farther than that. Then they can analyze it with AI and give it a sentiment and have a new column for the sentiment, and then they can analyze it with AI and say, okay, let's go outside of sentiment, let's talk about features and put that in a new column. So like all of a sudden you have this matrice that represents the DNA of that review. Well, computers are dang good at comparing numbers. And so in a vector database, which is what uses this idea of a matrice, you can compare that review to another review and get a pretty darn good idea of how similar it is. So when you said it's an outlier, like they've got lots of things they can compare to now that just weren't available before, especially with AI. So it really is a lot easier to spot than it used to be.
Yeah, I actually the vector databases in general are super fascinating, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because we could spend an hour just chatting about those. But
Yep.
from the perspective of product recommendations, a good vector database, which I'm sure Amazon is working on as it relates to future product recommendation engines, is incredibly powerful, right? Because it
It,
understands the difference between the identical pen, but just in blue versus black versus
yep,
red ink,
yep.
right? But it also
Or
understands
even
the
the pen that
pencil.
writes better.
Yeah,
Does this pen write better, and have a column about
yeah,
how it writes better? And
yeah,
it's unreal. You no longer have to have an index to make that fast, right?
right.
So
Exactly.
it's just unreal the level of speed at which we can access data in this day and age with the stuff that's coming forward.
So, one thing that's sort of just bigger picture, the last few years within the Amazon marketplaces have been sort of crazy, right? Because you had a period of time where there were a bunch of roll-ups going out and like buying tons and tons of FBA sellers and particularly bigger ones, right? And sort of some of those flamed out a little bit. They raised lots of zeros right when they went out on these buying sprees, and others, some of the categories got sort of overheated to the point where like you couldn't afford sponsored listings in that category anymore.
Yeah.
But I sort of get the sense that a lot of those folks have sort of burned through their drunken sailor money, and it's sort of returning to normalcy. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's just my imagination because I don't have a footprint into as many industries, categories as perhaps you guys do as a third party platform.
That's a great question. I would say, and this is less based on the data, so that makes me sounds like a good LinkedIn post. To go kind of pick apart and see like, are we still dealing with drunken sailor money? I think there is some of that still out there.
Right.
But I actually think that the aggregators who are still out there, the ones who are actually succeeding at their jobs, they're no longer burning through money that way. So even the ones that existed, I think the sheer nature of like the sentiment that's out there, that's been the shift. I just had Corey on, and I cannot remember his last name right now, but Corey on from Unibrands, UNY brands, on my podcast, and he was saying, I don't know how to tell a lot of these sellers that one, their business isn't worth what it used to be, but also we're still doing this idea of aggregating brands and doing it very well and doing it very profitably. And I think the way they're doing that is doing it smart. So, I mean, just based off of my sheer understanding of who's out there and the people that I'm talking to in the industry, I'm not seeing the same level of um, rampant. You can kind of see it in the lavish spending and just the parties that people throw and the different things that are out there, right? Like there are other indicators like, wow, that booth must have cost, there's just ways to see like that was not done economically.
Yeah,
Like
right.
there are ways to do things sharp and professional, and there are ways to do things like, holy crap, what what were you even thinking?
Yeah.
Like you obviously didn't have a limit on that credit card.
Right, right. I want to jump into another tactical question because my team may actually know the answer, but I haven't asked them. It just sort of popped into my head. One of the unique things about the Amazon marketplace is the
Mm-hmm.
interrelationship between organic visibility and paid
Mm-hmm.
advertising, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
in Google, it's church and state, right?
Yep.
So you have an organic rank for things, and you
Mm-hmm.
have like a paid rank for things, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
in PLA ads or paid placement. But in Amazon, sales velocity overall is an indicator into their or sort of organic visibility, right? So when you're doing your calculus around advertising, it's actually somewhat myopic to just look at this ad drove this sale, right? Because those ads driving sales overall, right, are going to have this sort of halo effect
Mm-hmm.
on your overall visibility.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a calculus to be able to really get a good handle on sort of, well, how much should I press on the gas above and beyond what I can see easily in my
Mm-hmm.
reporting? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to get an extra halo effect, but it's hard for me to know exactly how much of a organic halo effect I'm going to get until I actually hit the gas.
Well, I can confirm that. So the largest Amazon seller in the world is Pattern. And a lot of people don't pattern. What's pattern? They are you could think of them as an aggregator, but they do it in a very unique way. They develop exclusive wholesale relationships with individuals and essentially take over the brand that way.
Hmm.
And so the individual, it's not a true like aggregation from the standpoint of like they purchased them.
Hmm.
But it might as well be from the standpoint of the footprint and the platform and everything there. So
Right.
Pattern, and they throw a show here in Utah once a year. I was talking to one of their partner managers, and I was asking him some questions about their data team and some of the different things that they're doing. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we've got like 60 engineers who are working on top of the Amazon API, and we've got several data scientists that are going in there as well." And the cool part about what we're able to do is we literally know exactly how much advertising, how much to push on that gas pedal before we can pull it off, because we've done enough A/B testing now that we can tell like you got to put a certain amount in there and then you can back off and let the organic kind of take over and come down to a piece of it. So like confirmed from the largest seller in the world that's a real thing.
Oh, for
I mean,
sure. Yeah.
and when I heard him talking about it, I was like 60 engineers. Like I'm starting all of a sudden I'm starting to do the math on like engineers make like 100K a piece each. Like, wow. Like we're talking about a lot of money that's been thrown at that problem to kind of pick that apart. So exact numbers on how much that's going to go, I think that's a difficult question to answer
Yeah.
in aggregate.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say that if you're completely ignoring that side, either side of the equation, organic or paid, you're missing out. One thing I would say is traffic by child ASIN. That report is like mind-numbingly valuable from the standpoint of helping you understand what's there. And the AMS data, the Amazon marketing stream data that's come out that gives you hourly like impressions and conversions.
Right.
We have an wasted ad spend report where we'll tell you your A cost by hour over the last 60 days. So like we'll tell you like this hour of the day is the best A cost you could possibly have. So it gives you some day parting ideas and
Yeah.
ways to dissect that data. And that's available only through Amazon Marketing Stream, and only if you have a third party provider who can help open that up to you, because that's not a report that you can just go in and connect on.
Yeah.
You can't go download that one
Yeah.
inside what's there. So definitely recommend taking apart some of your ad spend. Good friend of mine, Rolando Rosas, who does headsets. Global Tech is the name of the brand. He came to me months and months ago and was like, "Dude, Will, I am going to optimize the crap out of my ads. I want orders by hour." And so he created a heat map with us 6 months ago before everybody was starting to talk about it, and has seen some significant lift just by turning off ads in hours where he's not getting orders. And then he's continued to do that from the other side. So there are ways to optimize that spend to like pull off the gas pedal and only pull off in the places where you're getting the least amount of conversion, in ways that like Google's not like you can get in and look at some of that, but the level of data that they're now giving us access to go in and pick apart that is just really, really powerful. So
Yeah, what's fascinating about that is in Google, like day parting and day of week, bid boosting and bid suppression has been super powerful for years and years. But we had the added advantage of geosegmentation, right?
yep,
So lunchtime on the East Coast and lunchtime in Los Angeles is actually 3 hours skewed. So if you're going to do day parting and you only have sort of national level control, there's
yep,
like an extra sort of fuzziness in that, right? Which you can
yep.
sort of live with, in Amazon, because I don't believe Amazon, to my knowledge, has rolled out geoparting.
I haven't seen it yet. That'll
Yeah.
be a when that, I mean, it's coming. Those guys are investing so. If you want to know what Amazon's focused on, focus on how big the teams are around how many pizza teams did they create around that? I feel like there's a new pizza team or a new thing or a new event that they're rolling out around
Yeah.
advertising every flipping month. So they're focused there. That's coming.
Yeah. I mean, their DSP lets you do geo-targeting, right? But
Right.
the regular sponsored listing doesn't. So
Right.
it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to evolve and the level to which they give, API access to folks like you to further tune, right? Because it's
Yep.
almost like what happened in Google was, the folks who didn't use those end up being the advertisers that would show up at the crappiest times of the day because they were
Yep.
just bidding, right? And then the more sophisticated advertiser would go in there and basically cherry pick out the very best impressions and clicks
Yep.
throughout the day and throughout
Yep.
the week. And I sort of feel like that same scenario is unfolding in Amazon at the moment because when
100%.
click prices are expensive, you have to cherry pick out the good ones,
Yep.
right? Because you don't want the
Yep.
bad ones; they bring your overall numbers down.
Yep.
So it's been really fun for somebody who started in Google, right, to go in and
And
now
go,
be hired
yeah.
into the Amazon ecosystem.
One other tip I want to give around the traffic by child ASIN report. This is a finding. We did some analysis on that report specifically, and there is some idiosyncrasy to the way Amazon attributes the data.
Mhm.
And I think it's very important to recognize, like, because they have the attribution windows and the different things that are in there, the numbers inside that report, like if you were to go just randomly choose one SKU and watch the numbers for yesterday's data, I've seen them go up and down for as many as 14 days. And it's not just attribution data that's changing. It's stuff like impressions. Wait a minute, that was yesterday. How did impressions change from yet? So just when you're using data in Amazon, it's a good idea to get, to analyze some things like that. And for that traffic by child ASIN report, my recommendation would be wait 14 days
Mm.
so that it actually solidifies to something that Amazon may think is accurate. And try to connect those dots. At Seller Labs, we actually download that report again automatically for everyone that's using our data, so that they get the freshest version of yesterday, which the fact that I even had to use that phrase, the freshest version of yesterday, just blows my mind. But that's just another tidbit that if you're manually downloading that thing, don't trust it for 14 days because it shifts up and down. So again, coming back to like how much you asked, like, what are ways that I can know how much to push on the pedal?
Yeah.
Well, if I was going to make that decision, I wouldn't make it on any data I downloaded less than 14 days ago from the traffic by child ASIN report. So just wanted to throw that out there that we found some weirdness there, and have adjusted for it in our databases, but it's not, it's still weird inside Amazon.
Yeah. No, the similar situations used to happen in Google in the past. I mean, the first version of the bid management system we built, which has now been sunset, but the first version of Maestro had a heat-seeking missile algorithm in it that essentially used the most recent data to make the decision of whether to turn left, right, go up or down, right? But the data started getting fuzzier and fuzzier and messier as they sort of would remove certain clicks because they were like, oh, we decided like 3 days later it might have been a fraudulent bot, and so we removed it. And so now if you were to pull the data again, it's actually different than the data you were getting in real time. And so, from an engineering perspective, you really needed to sort of be aware of those kinds of reconciliations because you would have that same weird aha moment. You're like, but wait a minute, it didn't say that yesterday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it says that, right? And so it's good that
Mm-hmm.
your engineers are, on the ball and catching this stuff because it does make a difference, right?
Oh yeah,
To go in and
and
reconcile the data.
if you're not paying attention to it, it'll bite you. So.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'm sure we could go on for many more hours chatting about best practices in selling on Amazon. Clearly, you and your team know their stuff. So I hope that those folks watching and listening head over to check out your platform and the other platforms and make intelligent decisions about
Absolutely.
how to
Yeah.
automate.
Make that list. But like we said before, right? Write down I wish it did. And then quiz us down, ask us, does that actually do that? Right. Because we want to be honest and transparent about it as much as possible and show you what's the right platform to go. So please explore the options that are out there and choose the right one.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining me. It's been great catching up and chatting about the wonderful world of Amazon advertising.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.